I suppose when I think of God's goodness, it's hard to pick one or two things out, because I have a 40-year lifespan of God's goodness. I have known Jesus in my life when I was 5, so it's very hard to pick out a time that he hasn't been there for me. And even when at times I thought he wasn't good to me, and there are times that we all feel that God's not good to us, but actually those are the times that God has been the best with me and the best to me. And this week I've really been praying about it and thinking about times that really stood out for me, that maybe some people don't really know a huge amount about me. I'm a very open book, and most people know everything about me. People always say I'm an oversharer, but there are some parts to me that I suppose people don't really know very well. And one of those times was not so long ago, in April past, 2 years ago, at the end of the pandemic, coming towards the end of the lockdown in the first year. I took very sick with COVID. I worked the whole way through COVID, as most of you know. At that stage I was a paediatric nurse, and I was in neonatal intensive care at that stage, and I had managed to stay away from COVID, and which was really good. Our middle son has an autoimmune disease, so I needed to stay safe to protect him. And we had all, myself and my husband and our eldest son, had all been vaccinated to protect him. I got very sick very quickly. Ian was really sick with COVID as well, and it was a very frightening time in our home. I have underlying health conditions, and I'm asthmatic, and at that time I just got sick very quickly, and it all went downhill on the Thursday. I took very sick at home, and I knew that I needed to be in hospital, but I had a real fear of, if I go into hospital I won't come out from hospital, and that sounded really, really silly, but when you're sick and in the depths of something like that, you can't rationalise your thoughts properly. So I knew that I needed to be in the hospital, but Ian wasn't well that day either, and I thought, you always think you know better. I certainly do, and I at that stage thought, I think I can ride this storm for another 24 hours, but I suppose deep down I knew I couldn't. So that evening, on Thursday evening, Ian fell asleep on the sofa because he had finally got his temperature down. I was upstairs, and unbeknown to him, I had a bag packed, ready to go to the hospital. And I couldn't go to sleep on that Thursday night because I was frightened to go to sleep, because I was frightened if I went to sleep I would never waken again. My oxygen saturations were really, really bad and my breathing was really bad that night, and I suppose being a nurse I knew what that looked like. So I have never really been someone who gets an awful lot out of reading. I'm not a person who loves a book. But everyone that is seeing this will know that I identify with music, and music is how God has always spoke to me, even from a very small child. And that night I just listened to my worship music, and I sang in my heart. I couldn't physically sing, and I sang in my heart. And there's so many songs that God gave me, and a verse that I didn't know what the verse was that day or that night. Psalm 92 verse 2, to declare your loving kindness in the morning and your faithfulness in the night. That verse really resonates with me and has done ever since. God has always spoke to me in the middle of the night. I was a night duty staff nurse for 12 years, and through the night was when I spoke to God the most. But that night God met me in the place that I needed him to meet me in. He sat beside me on the chair. I have a green chair that sits at my window, and I didn't move from that chair that night because I didn't have the strength to, and I was frightened. And the words of the song that we sing very often in church, which is one of my favourite songs, you will always hear me singing this song the loudest. The verse says, through the dread, though the dread of night overwhelms my soul, he is here with me, I am not alone. Oh, his love is sure, and he knows my name, for my God is the Ancient of Days. That song, I sing that song differently now than I did before this happened, because God genuinely, that the word night can mean different parts of our life. It doesn't necessarily mean the dark and the dark of night, but for me that night it did. It meant the night. God got me through that night and got me to the next morning. I ended up in hospital that next day, and I was really sick. Again, the next night, the Friday night, I was frightened to close my eyes. I had masks on, I had blood tests done, I had lots of people around me. But again, God sat with me in my bedroom that night. I was on my own in the hospital for the period of time that I was in. The nurses and doctors couldn't really come in and out with me because I was COVID positive. It was a very, very lonely place. I know a lot of you will have experienced that. It was a very lonely place. It was a very dark place. And sometimes the enemy tries to use your thoughts against you at that stage, but God really protected my heart and my thoughts at that stage. God was my faithfulness and my strength in all of that, and his goodness is just abounding from that time on, and I do believe that was a shift in who I am today. God brought me out of that. I have now changed my job that I absolutely love because I get to help people every day. I have changed how I think about who I am as a person. Physically, I have changed how I think about myself in my fitness level, and just I see my body differently now because I see it as a temple of God and as a gift from God, and I just see the goodness of God from that one particular night in my life, and I never want to forget. And there's times where I struggle in other parts of our life, and we've had some difficulties in the past few months at home, and I am just reminded, and actually God actually physically a few weeks ago I was really struggling to come to terms with something, and God physically told me to go and sit on that green chair. Just sit on the green chair. Now I didn't know what I was sitting on the chair for but God brought me to that chair to remind me of the goodness that he had given to me and what he had brought me through on that night, and to remind me if he can do it that night, he does it every night and every day. And sometimes we're so busy in life that we don't hear that because we're so busy trying to fix things ourselves. And I suppose it's just to remember to sit down and take time and reflect on actually what God has brought us through and what he continues to bring us through. And everyone can look back on their life and see how good God has been. And I challenge you to do it.
So